Hello, mixtresses and mixters. Yeah, I pressed record and now I'm gonna make you watch me make a drink. So, I'm doing an unfair comparison of, sorry about the shadows, as soon as I sit down they won't be as bad because I am blocking the light right now. Okay, so I realized, I was thinking about getting rid of, and I think I am going to get rid of Halloween Oracle, because for years I've been saying, it's a great basic Oracle deck. I love using it as a basic Oracle deck, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? It's not that great as a basic Oracle deck. It kind of sucks as a basic Oracle deck, to be quite honest with you. And I just got, thank you to the lovely Wildfire Meg at Rose Honey Ritual. Check out her channel. She's putting out all kinds of really cool stuff right now. She's like the most literary of all of us, I feel. Like she's always showing off really cool, like lit major level books, man, on her channel. And she's got a spirituality, yeah, I can't wait for all of more of your videos, Wildfire Meg. Okay, let's maybe tilt. Can we tilt? Should we tilt? Should we? Could we? So I realized that there were several cards. Some of the cards that I basically picked the cards, mostly the cards that I like from Halloween Oracle, and most of the cards that I really like and appreciate from Halloween Oracle actually are available in the Seasons of the Witch Samhain Oracle. Sorry, that was what I was starting to say, is that Meg gave me this for my birthday. Thank you, Meg. Got distracted by talking about how cool she is. Okay, so I realized that there are direct comparisons between these two decks, as in there are certain cards that are the same title is, the same sentiment is mirrored, which makes sense because, they're both Halloween Oracle decks, that they would have some of the same themes. But I also realized that there were just many instances in which Seasons of the Witch has the same thing that Halloween Tarot has, but they do it better. The one downside that I have with Seasons of the Witch Samhain Oracle, and I'm going to show that entire deck, so this is kind of an unfair comparison, but it's not a complete unfair comparison, because I mean, maybe I'll show the rest of Halloween Oracle, but I just pulled aside the cards that actually pretty directly match up with each other for these two decks. So let's just go ahead and get into that. I also realized that one of the things I don't like about Seasons of the Witch Samhain Oracle, I don't like these little weird poems on the cards, because most of the time they don't rhyme and they're not super good. And I mean, I don't know anything about poetry, so don't listen to me, but I don't really like them. I've tried reading them aloud, like incantations, but it doesn't always... I mean, some of these cards are self-explanatory, like Ancestors. I don't need a keyword for that, but I do want to show you guys that I've added keywords to about 2/3 of this deck. So this is kind of a show off of the alterations that I did to the Samhain Oracle, and it's also a little bit of an unfair comparison, whatever. You guys can see what the title of this video is. I don't even know what I'm going to title it yet. But let's get into it. They both have an Ancestors card. In this case, it's more of it's chopping down a tree with some logs. That's interesting. But this one's just kind of, DNA in a tree, which works. But I don't really like a lot of the, sort of little subtitles on Halloween Oracle don't make sense to me a lot of the time, too. Anyway, this, risk and reward. I guess it's funny because I was going through and comparing these cards last night, and I was also deciding based on some of the cards in this deck, because I've had this deck for I don't know, 2.5 years, something like that. So there are several cards in the Halloween Oracle that I'm used to some of the associations in that deck. I'm used to the interpretations of some of the cards in that deck. So I was, deciding what to choose for the keywords on Samhain Oracle, partially based on this deck, but not in this case. But whenever I was reading the guidebook for Samhain Oracle in order to decide what to put as my keywords on the apples card, it kind of unlocked for me, oh, that's why it's a risk and a reward, because you're taking a huge risk by biting out of this apple, and it could be a delicious apple or it could be poison. You don't know. That's sort of the deceptiveness quality of, like, both of these decks are kind of approaching this apple motif in the same sort of like evil witch kind of way. Evil witch and Snow White kind of way. They both have a black cat card. I really like this card. I think it's super cute. But I chose luck and independence as the keywords on that one. That's one thing I just like. I just wish that they would have, instead of putting these little poems on the card, the incantations, I think is what they call them, they should have put keywords on the card. And if you want the incantation, hey, it can be in the guidebook and you can use it that way, you know? Because this is the Seasons of the Witch guidebook is very useful. Okay, so they both have cauldron. So I did steal the keyword of healing to use here because I do like it. And transmutation, which I had a hard time getting that all on there. It doesn't look super cute, but whatever. This is pretty much my favorite card in this deck. I get it all the time. And this one makes total sense to me that graveyard be attached to the term unnecessary fear, because a lot of people fear graveyards, but I find them to be the most peaceful places ever. And in the guidebook of Samhain Oracle, peace was one of the keywords for graveyard, and I added the unnecessary fear because I am going to be giving up this deck, so I won't have this card anymore, but I will still be thinking of this card when I pull this one, you know? So they both have an owl card. I kind of wish the owl was a bit more prominent in this card. I guess it's more about the woman kind of embodying the owl vibes, but I just kind of wish the owl were more important in this card. I think I can tilt up even more here. Why not? And then for Jack-o'-lantern, the keyword is protection. This deck, the Samhain Oracle, has both a protection card and a pumpkin card. So I decided to add protection as the keyword here too, so that, yeah, because I wanted that to still be there, even though this isn't technically a carved pumpkin, and the whole idea with carved pumpkins is that they ward off evil spirits, right? But I wanted that element to be there too. Plus, protection is really the only magic that I do for the most part. Like, banishing and protection and boundaries is like, whenever I do spells, it's really, they're almost always related to that. So for me, having 2 protection cards in a deck, ain't nothing wrong with that. They both have a spider card, and I do always, because of this deck, every time I see the imagery of a spider, I think of community. I mean, it's not just this deck that has that association with spiders, right? But that's just how I think of it always. It doesn't matter what, if I have any Oracle deck that has a spider in it, if the symbolism is supposed to be something other than community, I just ignore it. It's community. That's what spider is. It's community, and it's Kali even too. They both have an underworld card. Guess I could move these like closer together. Like, not a great comparison if they're not close together. They both have a veil card. So, you know, revelations of the future, that kind of thing. They both have a winter card. They both have witch. And in this case, I just, like, you know, put brackets around alchemy of self. Because sometimes the little poems do include some of the keywords that are used for the symbolism on the cards. It's just not super consistent. I'm just not into the little poems. I know a lot of people really love them, so, but it's fine. I made it work for me. I added keywords, so it doesn't matter. This is where, okay, so it gets a little bit more muddy as far as like the associations. They're not like one-to-one associations, but I decided to use this mischief card as comparing to trick or treat because of the keyword mischief and play. And to be honest, I've always disliked this card just because of the kid vibes. And honestly, I don't love a lot of the artwork in Halloween Oracle. I definitely, like, if we're doing an unfair comparison, I absolutely prefer the artwork in this. Although this is like visually my favorite. I say that as this is visually my favorite card in this deck, and I will actually kind of miss it. But since this keyword is intuition, I used this one. Kind of has two comparisons because the Samhain Oracle has both a divination card, so you know, scrying divination, she's holding a crystal ball, and it has an intuition card. So overall, there's just no contest for me. The Samhain Oracle is just so much better, so much more useful. I never understood, again, it's like that apples card. I never understood why this deck, the keyword was regret. Like maybe it's in the guidebook and I just forgot. And because I don't really look at the guidebook in Halloween Oracle, because to me this Oracle deck feels like it should be self-explanatory, but it's not a lot of the time. But I figured haunted is similar because it's a concept of being haunted by your past, being haunted by something that you regret, like being followed around by the ghost of a regret. And so then it was like, okay, I get why this card says regret now when I read the guidebook definition for this card. It's funny. This one also has two because this card does not have a bat card. And I personally, the keyword that I associate with bat energy is rebirth. So I just decided death/rebirth. You know, this deck has a rebirth card and it has a bat card. So there you go. God, I love the art in this deck. It's so, like when I first got this, I got this deck a really long time ago, and then I'm pretty sure I gave it to Meg, which is hilarious because I had kind of forgotten that I did that. I couldn't remember what I had done with it, and then when she mentioned it, I was like, oh yeah. So either I gave it to her or I gave it to Suren, and I couldn't remember. So she couldn't exactly remember either. So it's most likely that the one that she has, I gave her, and then she ended up giving me. Because I don't know, I wasn't ready for it at the time or something. And right now, I am just so 100% here for this deck. One of the reasons why I wasn't super ready for it when I had it before, I think is because of the lack of diversity in Samhain Oracle. But in the Yule Oracle, Seasons of the Witch Yule Oracle that just came out, they actually address that in the guidebook. They say they have rectified it with Yule Oracle. There's much more diversity in that deck. And they have, you know, they addressed it in the guidebook saying that they would, you know, from now on, they're going to be better about that and that they've heard the critiques, you know. Which is interesting because one or two of the creators are people of color in the Seasons of the Witch Oracle series. So like, it's kind of, I mean, I can just imagine that anyone that would have been like, you know, sending them messages or something were probably just like a bunch of white people telling them that they, you know, weren't doing people of color right. You know, anyway, that's the whole thing. But one of the reasons why it kind of, you know, I just felt like, well, it's all just a bunch of skinny white bitches in this deck. You know, it's not just only white people. It's also only emaciated white people, emaciated looking white people in this deck. But I can accept it now knowing that this isn't the only representation, you know? Does that make sense? Now that Yule Oracle has kind of fixed the issue, that particular aspect of this deck doesn't really bother me anymore. I don't know. Maybe that's wrong. But anyway, this deck has, Samhain Oracle has 44 cards in it, I'm pretty sure. And The Halloween Oracle, I think, has 36, 32. I don't know. It's definitely more in Samhain Oracle. This one's kind of a stretch, but I really like the key phrase of emotional intelligence being attached to vampire in this deck. This is one of the cards that's going to bother me a little bit. Not having this deck anymore. I'm going to miss it. That's what I meant. But I thought passion and manipulation, and this seduction card being 3 women, this reminds me of like the Dracula babes. You know, there were 3 of them, right? Weren't there? Like Dracula sisters, or I don't know that story super well, but. And then this is the other card in Halloween Oracle that I'm really gonna miss. This Hearth card, it warms my heart. You got this hunk of bread, you got some candles, and so I decided that the altar card kind of is the closest thing in Samhain Oracle to the Hearth card. Kind of the closest thing, because it's still like a sacred space, and I definitely think of a fireplace as a sacred space. So those are all the cards that I wanted to compare to each other, like literally 1-to-1, and I will just show you the rest of both of these decks. I'll just show them to you side by side, and then we'll get to see exactly how many cards are in both too. So there's no comparison here. Truly unfair, but I will just kind of point out from here on. So crystals and herbs, healing is the key word for that one. There is nothing like this Barnbrack card. There's no candy or anything in this deck. So that's a little sad because, you know, there could have been an inclusion of some Halloween candy in this deck, like some licorice. I mean, come on. But there isn't. Oh, wait, did I just flip? I just flipped this and not this, didn't I? Did I just do that? Yes, I did. Okay. God. And there's not really any love-related cards in Samhain Oracle, which I don't mind. I don't need there to be, really. Well, let's see. Let's actually just flip through it really quick. Is there anything that's kind of, I don't know, sweet, loving, anything like that? No, there really isn't. I mean, this would be the closest thing because we actually have like the harmonizing of elements here. The 4 elements represented as people. So that's like the closest. I hate this forgiveness card. It just looks really, to me, it just looks really religious. And I don't like this invisibility card either because the keyword is authenticity. Like, what the fuck is that? Like, I don't understand that concept. You're invisible, so you're authentic. I don't know. Let's read the guidebook. I have it right here. Why not? Invisibility. Oh, this one has like little poems too, actually, but the little poems are just in the book. So they did that part right, in my opinion. Heart beating we sense but do not see. They touch, we chill, they come unseen. You know that feeling you sometimes have that someone is watching you? You cannot see them, yet you have a distinct feeling that someone is there. All the hairs are up on the back of your neck. You think you see something in the corner of your eye. This is the power of invisibility, the indirect fear and covert threat of having to fight something that we cannot see. Well, what does that have to do with authenticity then? Got interrupted. Like I wanted to talk about the history of the house. Okay, I just like read this whole thing, and the only thing that I can possibly surmise from this guidebook is that the idea of choosing to be invisible means you're being inauthentic. That's the only thing that I can see for that, but whatever. I'm not keeping this deck, so I don't need to wrap my head around that, but I'm just, you know, I've had this deck for years and I feel like I don't fully understand it. This totally makes sense to me. Broom as a tool to be a cleansing. So this deck also, I haven't mentioned this yet, but this deck has 3 categories of items, or 3 categories in it. It's witches' tools, witches' familiars, and like just Samhain in general. So like everything else. I mean, I love the idea of joy and rejoicing in the present, but this chick does not look like she's happy at all. She looks morose. And they've obviously like photoshopped her arms into being up, because like anyone with their arms in this position is going to look more joyful than that. I mean, they just are. You know? So this card makes me cranky just because she doesn't look happy at all. There's not really any cards in this deck that are like a journey, like a road ahead kind of card. Let me see. Not really. I mean, there's the closest thing I feel might be this lamp card, just because a lamp can light your way. This one, I just, again, like, I don't understand why this is here. It's just shoehorning in Dia de los Muertos in this Halloween deck by just, this feels like, I don't know really what I'm talking about, so don't, you know, don't sour on your Halloween Oracle if you love it, listening to me right now. But just like, what is happening here? Acceptance and equality. Lady de los Muertos. Like, they just want you to know that we accept just like this tiny little glimpse into another holiday that is around Halloween time. Like, what? I mean, I guess, okay. Here's the thing that I wasn't doing. There's a wolf. I don't know what I was just trying to do. I guess this is the closest comparison in this deck, is the werewolf card. I love the fact that there's vampire, werewolf, and witch in this deck. I like that they're there, but I just think that this werewolf is, I just think he's really ugly, and you can see his underwear poking out of his pants, and that bothers me. It takes me out of it, you know what I mean? But that's just my critique of this art. I don't like this. I mean, I'm okay with collage decks, but I don't really like digitally photo manipulated decks. You know, I like actual physical cut and paste kind of collage. Oh yeah, and there's zombie in this deck too, which there's no zombie in this deck. I like this one too, because it's kind of another fortune-telling card, almost like reflection. What do you see? This could sort of be a scrying card as well. It's a revelation of truth, but it's more self-reflection. You know, what do you see when you look in the mirror? How do you see yourself? How do you face yourself? Okay, sorry, we're back to this. I didn't know this, but the third harvest is Halloween. It's, you know, so the first harvest is kind of like now, right? Didn't we just have the harvest moon? I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. I'm a terrible witch. There's no midnight card in this deck. Oh, and there's also mummy in this deck too. So there's mummy, werewolf, vampire, zombie, which is cool. Like, I kind of like that those figures are there, so I will kind of miss the idea of them, but I don't like the execution of them most of the time. Like, I like the vampire card and the witch card in this deck, but I don't really like this mummy imagery, and I don't really like the werewolf either. Oh, I'm not showing this entire deck because I have a card that I pulled for my day today. We're going to just call that the comparison to this Night Song card because it's voices, voices, song. And I just put on here ghost guides and goddesses because this is about sort of like your spiritual team, or however you consider that concept, speaking to you. And this deck has these: Skull of Darkness, Skull of Flowers, Skull of Light, and Skull of Stars. And the thing that's like just kind of bugs me is it's the same image of a skull every time. It's just been rendered slightly differently. Same cracking pattern. Everything is the same. This one, he has taken out a couple of the teeth, but it's still the same skull. And it's just kind of, I don't know, that just sort of bugs me. Like this deck, Halloween Oracle, does feel a little bit thrown together in the artwork sense. And it's not super consistent with, like, it's Jimmy Manton did the art, but I really love his art in the Kali Oracle. And there's a few instances of like some repeated motifs of imagery, but it's not as obvious as like, I mean, the whole card is based, the focal point is the skull on all 4 of those skull cards, and it's just the same skull edited differently. And I don't feel like they're super, like they make sense necessarily. Like, okay, Skull of Darkness, blind spots, okay. Skull of Flowers. Okay. Then we have Skull of Light. I don't know. I just feel like this deck is kind of all over the place as far as like, some cards are like Skull of Light, and then some cards are Skeleton, and some cards are Werewolf, and some cards are like just a basic concept. I don't know. I guess that exists here too, but it doesn't bother me as much. It doesn't feel as inconsistent. Okay, so Halloween Oracle has, oh, only 5 cards less. Is that really true? 5. Okay, let me count. Let me just count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 6. Okay, this deck has 36, and I think this one has 44. I guess I can not count them and just look at the guidebook. Yeah, 44. Okay, so obviously I wasn't flipping them over consistently. Oh yeah, it was because some of those comparisons, I had 2 cards from this deck to compare to the ones in that deck. Okay, that's what happened. So grief, didn't need any keywords there. That is a concept that makes total sense. Potions and spells, don't really need keywords there. I didn't really need wisdom, but I wrote it on there anyway. Ritual. Oh, dark moon. I'm a little sad that this deck has a dark moon card, but it doesn't have a full moon card. And, you know, there's a full moon on the back of every single card. Wouldn't it be cool if there was a full moon in the deck? But in any case, it is my preferred Halloween themed Oracle deck, and it is the one that I'm keeping. So there you go. I'm really kind of loving the idea of this series of Oracle decks because I'm actually starting to, now that I'm really trying to, you know, I'm still kind of culling my collection, going back, culling all the time. And one thing that I'm realizing is that for me, I can't have a lot of decks out at the same time. So there are some that I do want to keep, but I don't want to look at all of them all the time. So I think I'm kind of like morphing into a possible model of like, there are certain decks that I'm going to keep stored, and certain times, I mean, a lot of people do this. I just haven't done this before. But I think I'm truly going to, you know, there are going to be decks like the Samhain Oracle. I'm going to get it out on like September 1st and use it probably through November. And then I'm going to get out my Yule Oracle and use it, you know, from Thanksgiving through the end of the year, probably. I have my Mermaid Tarot deck that I'm going to be getting out only in the summer months. I have my Santa Muerte Tarot that, like, I think of it as a deck that I'm not always allowed to use, but I think the reason that I think that is because I only want to use it like probably like mid-October through mid-November, possibly. You know, I'm just sort of like I'm starting to put together the idea that not all of my decks need to be out at all times. So that's going to lend itself to me having not a big collection, but it's going to lend itself to me having slightly more decks that I'm comfortable with being out at one time, because they're not always going to be out at one time, because I really suffer from, you know, looking at all my decks all the time and feeling like I have too many. But if there are some that I acknowledge that I only use at certain times of the year, then I can put them away. Like, what a concept. I know people have been doing this forever, but I just haven't ever been able to wrap my mind around that concept, but I'm starting to now. And I think this Seasons of the Witch Oracle series is helping me to acknowledge that there are times for certain decks. And that's kind of fun too, because, like, you know, when a new month is upon you, when a new season is upon you, you can go ahead and, you know, get a new deck out for that time period. I kind of want to just extend this hangout session for another couple of minutes and pull my card, because I've dropped one back here. I am pulling a card a day from this deck right now and just kind of like going into the guidebook and really just diving in with it, because this deck is, I think it's going to be really special to me this time. It's funny because I gave it away the first time, but it's kind of special that, like, I gave Meg her copy and she ended up giving me one, and it was just like, it was just a total accident that it happened that way. But sorry, I'm having trouble shuffling around the tripod today because this is a weird angle, but we're just gonna go for it. I'm gonna pick my card of the day from this deck. Trying to get better at this whole like shuffling like a book thing with oracle cards that are a little bit bigger, because it works really well. Like, it's just easier than to try to wrap my hands around the taller cards of an oracle deck. Plus, it's just really satisfying. I like doing it. Just like shuffling it together like a book. Like a book. Okay, let's do the whole fancy thing where you like spread them out and then pick one. Doing it with my eyes closed. Okay, it's this one. Elements. Remember to feel the warmth pulsing through her womb. Okay, that's creepy. You are a child of mother. True harmony awaits you. Okay, well, I won't make you guys sit through me reading the guidebook definition for this, but I mean, it seems pretty self-explanatory to me, the harmoniousness of all four elements. This is kind of also a magician type card, I think. So, yeah. Anyway, also, fun side note about the guidebook. This is apparently just kind of like also Samhain Oracle Seasons of the Witch review, but it has, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 spreads. And normally I wouldn't even mention that because I'm not much of a spread person, but the spreads in this deck are really well done. Like, they are super useful. And like, for not just this deck, but any deck. Like, I don't even use spreads that much, but I have gotten a lot out of playing around with the spreads in this deck. And this deck also has other little things. like under the description of the Candle Magic card, it has, you know, candle color correspondences. There are other, of course I probably won't be able to find them now that I'm, yeah, under the crystals and herbs card, there's a little description of different crystals that you can use for Samhain and herbs to use for Samhain. So this cute little oracle deck based around Halloween and witchiness actually gives you some practical witchy advice in the readings of the cards in the deck, which I think is super, super sweet. But anyway, thank you, Meg, for giving me this deck again. I apparently just needed it to be gifted to me by a really cool person to be able to really get into this deck. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. I probably will wait to show off the Yule Oracle until because I haven't added keywords to the Yule Oracle yet. I just put it away because I looked at it and I was like, I'm not ready for this. It's not Christmas time yet. I don't want to think about this yet. So I'm not going to be ready for the Yule Oracle until at least like mid-November. So at that point, I will probably get that out and really start working with it. But yeah, for now, this is going to be my sort of like daily draw Oracle deck. And I haven't had a daily draw Oracle deck in a while. So it's kind of cool that like, I don't know. This is just, it is just so much different. Okay, sorry guys. Apparently I'm babbling some more. Just a word of advice. If you are a person that currently finds yourself in a space where you're acquiring new tarot and oracle decks all the time, I can say as a person that had this oracle deck, I had this oracle deck back in a time period when I was acquiring oracle and tarot decks constantly, all the time. And it just came back into my life. I had a moment where I just felt so guilty about all the things that I had that I wasn't using very much. So I got rid of it. And then it came back into my life at a time when I'm not acquiring very many things anymore. And now that it has come in at a time when I have time to devote to it, because I don't have a ton of new shit right now, I can really take the time to really wrap my head around what this oracle deck is. It turns out it was me. It wasn't the deck's fault that I was overstimulated by divination decks whenever it came into my life the first time. Now I can really love it for what it is and use it. And like, I don't know, it's special this time around. And probably part of that is because it was a gift from someone I consider to be a new friend. And I don't make new friends that easily. You know, a big part of it is that, but it's also because I have time. Like I get a new deck and I sit down with it for hours. You know, I spent hours last night going through and deciding what keywords I wanted to use and comparing it to the cards in the Halloween Oracle that I'm going to get rid of. And, you know, that whole thing. Anyway, I don't know. That is just advice to you, that if you are a person that feels like you're drowning in divination decks and you're constantly looking for one that works for you, part of the reason that you might be feeling like none of the decks that you're acquiring are working for you, I mean, your mileage may vary, but it's possible that that is because of the sheer volume of things that you're taking in, because this deck feels like a completely different deck to me when I've had it before, because I was overstimulated before and now I'm not. So I'm being so rewarded by spending more time with the things that I have. It's just a completely different world. I feel like I'm actually learning divination now instead of just feeling like sort of a distracted rabbit looking at all the pretty artwork and decks, you know. I'm still looking at pretty artwork in decks, and I still have a variety to choose from at my disposal, but it's less. So I feel calmer. There's not as much noise. Anyway, I hope that some of that shit makes sense. Anyway, I'm gonna shut the fuck up now. Thank you for listening. Guess what, guys? I just took my work bra off and don't have to put it on again for 18 days. I am so excited. I can't even tell you. Not really necessarily about the bra part, but it's just a symbol, you know? It's a symbol of vacation. So get ready, because this is probably the first of many, many videos that I will be spamming you guys with over the next couple weeks because I have more time off. Okay, bye.